Hi, I'm Kayla Allen, and I am a assistive technology and activities facilitator with Future Insights, as well as a volunteer with the American Council of the Blind. I lead ACB Crafters. We are a community of blind and visually impaired individuals who have come together to teach and learn crafting from one another. I believe that if there's a will, there's a way. We just need to figure out what that way is.
Well, my name is Leanne Frederikovich, and I am the host at Hadley's Crafting Circle Discussion Group. This is a monthly discussion group that meets on Zoom the second Wednesday of every month at 4 p.m. Central Time. This group is made up of visually impaired people that either have a passion for crafts or are looking to learn more about crafting as a visually impaired person. Every month revolves around a different crafting theme or topic. One month we may be discussing crafting how-tos of soap making, and the next month we may shift and talk about the non-visual aspects of scrapbooking. As for my favorite craft, that's really tough to narrow down because I like so many of them. So I would have to say, honestly, it's a three-way tie between quilting, knitting, and scrapbooking.
Hi, I am Jill Rossiter. I'm the first Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Crafters Division. Pleased to be with you here today and share with you a bit about our organization. We began in 2008 as a division of the National Federation of the Blind. This was brought about by Joyce Kane, who was our founder. She felt like that there was a place for people who were blind and visually impaired to be able to enjoy arts and crafts that they once did or maybe have never done and wanted to learn to do. So out of her inspiration, our division was born. We currently have over 60 paid members of our division. We have members from all over the United States as well as other countries such as Canada. We have had individuals to participate that were from South Africa, from England, from Singapore, Mexico. So we're a very diverse bunch, and we love folks and love to teach and love for folks to learn about what we do. My favorite craft is quilting. And so I've got my very first quilting project I'll show. This is a hand quilted lap blanket that I made for my daughter when she was small. It has alternating squares, for those of you who may not see it, with pink little micro dots, which are little teeny tiny white dots, almost like a pinpoint. And then also the alternate square is a tossed print of Hello Kitty. And for those who may not know what tossed means, it means, any which way you look at it is the correct way, which works out really well if you're a blind quilter. So then you don't have to worry so much about the orientation of your fabric when you're sewing the squares together.
Hi, my name is Tammy Roussel, founder and CEO of Mitzy Kit. My mom, Mitzi, lost her eyesight in her 80s due to retinitis pigmentosa. My mom, being a seamstress all her life, was particularly devastated when she could no longer sew. And I believe it was divine intervention that helped me to discover a way to help her to sew again by touch. After discovering this way to help her to sew by touch, she had such an improved quality of life that I felt compelled to bring this to others who were blind and visually impaired. So a little bit more about Mitzy Kit. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for the blind, elderly, disabled, and children by providing accessible sewing and fabric crafting products and training. We also support employment of the blind and the disabled through strategic partnerships like that with the Lighthouse of Central Florida. And we donate 100% of our profits to charity. Mitzy Kit provides accessible sewing and crafting through various adaptations and training. Some of our adaptations include tactile guides that we provide on our fabric. We have multiple levels of complexity in our project lines. We have a simple line that is a no-sew project. We have moderate and advanced lines that are hand sewing projects. In our hand sewing projects, we provide tactile seam allowances on all perimeters of our project fabric. This allows someone to feel the tactile seam allowance and sew beneath it so that they are ensured of sewing a straight line. This is what helped my mom to be able to create quilts, and we worked on these as joint projects. In addition, we provide in our no-sew line tactile borders around pre-drilled holes in the perimeters of the fabric. This allows people to lace the project pieces together using a plastic needle and ribbon, or even shoelaces for those who have some dexterity issues. In addition to our tactile guides, we also provide tactile cues. These cues indicate where somebody should start their project. They also indicate sequencing, for instance, row 1 from row 2 and row 3. And they also indicate directionality so that a person is ensured that they are sewing their pattern in the right direction. And finally, we provide audio, video, text, and phone instructions so that we can provide excellent customer service and enable people to be successful, whether it's the individual themselves who is using the project, or we also provide train the trainer instructions. All of our kits we provide are pretty much all in one, aside from some sewing notion accessories that you may want to purchase separately. They require no prep work, and we provide ease of training online.
When teaching classes over Zoom like we do, it's important to be sure to describe what you're doing in as much detail as possible, such as using the clock method. Further away from us on the table would be 12 o'clock. To the right would be 3 o'clock. Towards us would be a 6 o'clock. And to the left would be 9 o'clock. And then you can do different times within that clock face to get more detail of where specific items would be placed or orientating. We also use top, bottom, left, and right, descriptive words such as that. When presenting over Zoom, I try to make sure that I'm using a high contrast background so that individuals who do have vision are able to see the project easier. So for example, a few weeks ago, we were making birdhouses, and since the wood was a lighter color, I put a black piece of poster board down on my tabletop so that the wood would be able to be seen better on the camera. And this works for individuals in their homes as well. If they have vision, it's always good to have a high contrast. It seems to help a lot. While I am and most of the other teachers are teaching how to do a craft, we're working along with the students. This gives us the ability to describe what we are doing as well as what the outcome of the project should be throughout the project. So we'll stop often and describe what we are working on, what it looks like at that point, so that it's easier for people to troubleshoot what they are doing. Since again, this is over Zoom, I don't have the ability like I used to walk around a classroom and feel what individuals' projects are looking like to help them troubleshoot. So it's important to have verbal communication. It's also important to protect your work area and maybe your clothing. So if wearing a smock, I like to put down a tablecloth on my work surface that I get at the dollar store. It's just a plastic tablecloth. You can use newspaper, however, the ink from the newspaper can be transferred onto your project. So I like the tablecloth a lot better. It's easier cleanup. I can just pick it all up and put it all in the trash when I'm done if there's a mess. So it also makes, like I said, makes cleanup easier. Some other techniques that I have found that have been useful is using a cookie tray or a jelly roll pan when you're working with small items. That helps keep items from rolling away and just gives you a little area to work within. I've also used cupcake pans that have the 6 or 12 holes or cupcake divots in, and that works really well when you're working with items that are the same shape and size but maybe different colors to help keep them organized. When painting, I like to use a egg tray that I got at the dollar store. It's a circular tray and it has little divots you can set eggs in, and in the center it has a circular spot that I can put the water for my paint in. I always put my paints in the same order, in rainbow order, so red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, or so on and so forth around the tray. And I have tactile markers on the edges of the tray so that I can orientate myself better so I know which colors I am using. It's important to keep your supplies organized. A few ways I do this is, for example, when using beads, I have them sorted into separate Ziploc bags that I have labeled with the color of the beads. I've kind of done the same thing with my yarn, as I'm a crocheter. That's my kind of go-to craft. I have all my yarn separated by color because it's easier for me to figure out what the fiber type is rather than the color, since I don't have color perception. Another good tip for working when assembling projects, I'm going to go back to that birdhouse we built a couple weeks ago. And it's important when building something like that to do a dry run, is what I'm going to call it. And this means to put the items together that you want to put together without glue the first time, to see how it feels and looks before adding the glue and putting it together. That also makes sure that it fits correctly. And you can do this with a variety of items, not just a birdhouse. Mosaics, it's good to lay out your tiles or your items ahead of time, make sure they fit, and then add your glue. This is just a couple things that might be helpful, keeping like items together when you're storing them. So when I have all my paper crafting items together, I have all my yarn is stored in the same area. This just makes it easier when you go back and want to do a craft, you know where your supplies are.
Well, because we talk about so many different kinds of crafts, I thought I'd take my 3 favorites: knitting, paper crafting, and quilting, and maybe talk about a few adaptations that people in our group may find really helpful, either as seasoned crafters or as brand new crafters that are new to a specific craft. Let's take knitting first. So they may choose to use a loom, and I'm going to hold up a loom knitting for knitting, which is basically just a circular piece of plastic that has pegs sticking out of it, and each peg has a little head on it, and this allows you to wrap yarn around the loom, around these pegs, and then you use a tool to loop the yarn around the pegs and over the pegs, instead of using a traditional 2 needles that may be a little more difficult to control the yarn. So you may try to start out using a loom versus traditional knitting needles. Once you've mastered a loom, you could also go to something like, instead of using traditional needles, you might want to go to, which are completely circular, you may want to go to needles that are either square or have a hexagonal shape, because the knitting needles that are round tend to roll off the table, roll off wherever you set them down. So having something that has a hexagonal shape to them, which I'm going to hold up now, may be a big benefit. They're not nearly as easy to find. They may take a little bit of hunting to find them, but something as simple as that, when you set them down, they stay where you put them. Another thing that might be helpful is if you are going to be learning how to knit or knitting with traditional knitting needles, something as simple as putting something on the tip of your knitting needle as you're working on something when you're going to set it down, putting something on the end of it. They do have specific caps for the knitting needle so that your stitches do not slip off. But I even have, these are foam, I believe they were just foam lacing beads from one of my kids' projects from years ago, and just slipping that on the tip of the needle so your stitches don't fall off is a great way to hold your stitches on the needle. So that way, if you accidentally bump your project, you set it down, nobody's going to have you lose your stitches, which is really frustrating for any knitter, especially a visually impaired knitter. Trying to pick up those lost stitches can be a really frustrating aspect of knitting. Starting with larger needles versus smaller needles is a great way to work on some adaptations for knitting without sight or with low vision. Working on something that's going to give you some really big stitches and some really big stitch knit definition. You see, much easier to count your stitches. And here I'm holding up just a knit piece of fabric that has some really large stitches. This was knit on like a size 36 needle versus a traditional size needle. So these are really jumbo stitches, but here you can really see each stitch and its definition. So it's easier to count stitches when you're working on a project, something as large as this. Something else you might want to consider, using a knitting bowl that holds your yarn. It has a cutout on the side to keep track of your yarn and have the bowl hold your yarn, not to lose your yarn, as well as have it flow freely so that if there's any tangles, it helps untangle the yarn as well. So that's something that you might want to consider. So those are some good adaptations for knitting. Paper crafting, simple things. Instead of using traditional scissors, which I have here, you may want to consider using a paper trimmer that will nice and neatly cut your paper straight without having to worry about having blades trim your fingers instead of your paper. Marking your paper trimmer with frequently cut sizes that you trim your papers and your pictures to would be a great way so that you always know where your 3-inch mark is, where your 4-inch mark is. Really safe way to cut paper, cut pictures, cut any kind of paper product without having to worry about, am I going to get it cut straight? So that's one thing to think about with paper crafting. I've always considered myself a chunky paper crafter because I like to add texture, and I like to think outside of the box when I am wanting to create a scrapbook for people or for myself. I add very non-traditional products, and that's when it comes to either scrapbooking or paper crafting with the visual impairment. Really think out of the box. Think buttons, think fabric, think texture, ribbons. This scrapbook was created using an old pair of jeans for the covers that were just the bottom part of the jean pant leg was cut and glued on to pieces of particle board so that it could be used as cover. It adds texture, it adds interest. There's some burlap type ribbon included. There's a wooden flower that was added on. The O-rings that were used to secure the book to bind it together have ribbons, little strips of ribbon cut out and added to add a lot of texture and interest. So that's something to consider, really adding as much texture as you can to your paper crafting. Another thing that you might want to think about is not even considering a traditional scrapbook. This was a box that's made, again, lots of texture. There's a wooden letter S that was just painted and put on the front of the box. This is a wooden box that you can get at a lot of craft stores. You open it up, you can put in pictures, memorabilia. This one just says summer memories on the front of it. You can put your memories in the box without having to have them in a traditional scrapbook that's beyond, that has the page protectors. Makes it really inaccessible to a visually impaired person behind those page protectors. You take the page protectors, traditional pages away, you just put things in a box. Now you have a really accessible way to maybe sit down with your grandkids or sit down with your family and go through. Maybe there are, you went miniature golfing with your family and there's those scores of who won and the scorecards are in there. Maybe there's some rocks that you picked up on a nature walk. Maybe you went to the beach and there's some seashells in here. So these are some keepsakes that I consider part of scrapbooking, but they are really hands-on, textured, 3D memories that you can keep in a scrapbook box instead of a traditional scrapbook. So when it comes to paper crafting, think outside of the box when it comes to adding your memories in there. And then the last thing that I absolutely love is quilting. Things like automatic needle threaders for handheld needles, sewing machines that have automatic needle threaders already built in are great adaptations. Using a lighted stand magnifier when you're sewing is great. I tend to use a little light that attaches right onto my sewing machine. And here I'm holding up a light that attaches right on. There's a little part that just goes right onto my sewing machine. It offers a really bright, direct light. I put it right on. I shine that light right on my needle to offer some really direct task lighting. And this is a great way to get the light right where you need it on that needle to offer some really good lighting for your low vision clients, and really inexpensive as well. And it adds a lot of good contrast because you're going to get the lighting right where you need it. Kind of everything else will fade away. Simple things like marking right directly onto the sewing machine. If you're using a sewing machine, using some high contrast tape. They do make tape. I'm holding up 3 tapes in neon colors, pink, orange, and yellow, that you can mark 1/4 inch seams with, or actually any markings that you want. Honestly, I found that even works better than this is regular old duct tape. In all kinds of crazy colors, because it is really, it sticks well, it's going to stay in place, it's not going to pull up at all. To give you your seams in something really high contrast, most sewing machines are either white or off-white, so like a dark blue, something that's going to offer really good contrast is going to be great. Another thing that I found is there are things called quilting gloves that most people will use when they're actually to the quilting process in making quilts, putting all the layers of their quilt together. I found that even using them, quilting gloves have just a very thin polyester type glove, but on the tips of them, I'm going to hold up here, they have a bit of a grip to them. Using quilting gloves just when you're sewing really helps hold your fabric in place, because as you start sewing pieces of fabric together, the weight of the fabric tends to pull it down and it's hard to keep everything in place. So even just using your quilting gloves just with traditional sewing before you get to the quilting part of the quilt, just when you're making the quilt top even, really helps to keep everything where you want it, keep your rows straight. It's a nice little trick that I wish I knew earlier in my quilting career, but now that I know it, I tend to use them quite a bit. Another thing that I like to use in my quilting ruler is I do like to mark. I'm holding up my quilting ruler here, which is just a clear acrylic ruler. Mine is about 18 inches by about 6 inches. Using raised markers of some sort to mark off every inch. And then I also mark my quilting cutting mat as well. I do use that to help keep track of where I'm cutting. And then on the back of it, there's very thin, grippy, I'm not sure what they're called, but they're little grippy parts, little sticker that will help keep the ruler in place. It won't slip smoothly over the fabric, which is great because you don't want, once you get your ruler where you need to cut, you don't want it to move. So that little grippy circle will help keep it in place. So I found that very useful. And then also starting simple. Quilts don't have to be really elaborate. I'm just going to hold up a quilt top that is just really big, like 8-inch squares. Super simple, but really colorful. This one has flowers and gingham checks and reds and yellows and some greens in there, but very simple. So start simple with big squares and it's still going to be beautiful before you go to something like, angles and triangles and things like that. And you don't want to have to, it doesn't have to be really detailed to be really beautiful. I guess that's what I like to impress on people. It's all about the process when it comes to crafting. It doesn't need to necessarily be about the finished product. So if you're really enjoying what you're doing, the process is what's important. And I would say start with what you're comfortable with, and then you can get better. And as we do with anything, you get better with time and lots of practice.
Here at ACB Crafters, we offer a variety of crafts. We have ongoing fiber classes such as loom knitting, crochet, and needle knitting. Those each meet twice a month, and we have a beginner and an advanced class for each. We offer general craft classes on Saturdays at noon Eastern. And these will vary from origami to beading to paper crafting and just so much more. We've done so many projects, including basket weaving. We also offer a Friday a Friday Gab Fest, where we all come together for 2 hours at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we talk about the crafts we're working on. It gives us an opportunity to network with one another and have our questions answered if we are struggling in a specific area. We also now offer youth classes that meet on the last Sunday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. And this is really cool. This is a family-oriented group where whether you're a grandma or a parent with a visual impairment or a child with a visual impairment, we all come together and we craft together. So if you are for example, if you are a grandparent with a visual impairment and your grandchildren are sighted, they are still welcome. We are trying to make this all-inclusive family events. Thank you so much for letting me speak to all of you today. For any more information you can email acbcrafters@gmail.com. We do offer Google Groups as well as a listserv, and all our classes are free. You're just responsible for your materials.
Some of our products include no-sew lacing projects, where we can produce tote bag kits, fleece pillow kits, blanket kits, scarf kits, and other home decor type projects in our no-sew project level. These home decor projects include things like table runners and candle mats that enable people to feel like they can contribute to the beautification of their home or give them as a gift. In addition, we have our hand sewing projects, and these are a little more advanced, as we mentioned. And again, they can range from simple pillow kits, tote bag kits, kitchen accessory kits like hot pads and some table runners. We also have quilt kits that are more advanced. We have kits that are embellished with appliques or flowers that they can actually sew themselves. And we have sewing notion toolkits. There's so much that we'd love to tell you, but most importantly, how to contact us. We can be reached at www.mitzykit.org, and our phone number is 978-419-1824. And you can reach me by email at tammy.roussel@mitzykit.org.
If you have folks that are interested in our group, or you yourself are interested in learning more, you can reach out to us at www.krafterskorner.org. So that's Crafters Corner with K's. And that was to honor our person who founded us, Joyce Kane, with a K. And so you can go to our website and find out everything you would possibly want to know about us. We do have a Facebook group. We would love for you to join us there. We have a blog. We have, I think, a Twitter account. You guys that are better at tweeting and Twitter can tell more about that because I don't do that a lot myself. We have a WhatsApp group. We have an email listserv. You don't have to be a member to participate in our groups as far as the social media, the email list, and things like that. But to participate in classes, we want you to join us.
Hadley's Crafting Discussion Group is one of 10 discussion groups that Hadley runs. Most of them are monthly groups. 2 of them are weekly discussion groups. They are attended live and they're also recorded so that those that can't attend can listen to the recordings. We post our recordings a week or 2 after our live discussion groups. Hadley's, the Crafting Discussion Group, meets the second Wednesday of every month at 4 p.m. Central Time. To sign up for the group, you would go to hadley.edu/discussion-groups/crafting-circle. Now that's a really long address. You're also welcome to call 800-323-4238 and they will be happy to get you signed up as well. We also have a Facebook group that you can join and discuss all things crafting related. I know that our April discussion group, we're going to be talking about creating all kinds of different cozy pillows to help decorate your house. We have some no-sew versions. I'm holding up here a knitted pillow cover that we'll be discussing, as well as a no-sew pillow cover, which is a blue and yellow paisley fabric. That is a fabric pillow cover that has no sewing involved. So for those of you that either don't own a sewing machine or are not sewers, really easy to make with just a yard of fabric and a pillow form. And if there's any questions, you can also contact us by just emailing crafting@hadley.edu. That is probably the fastest way to find us.